Hello, viewers of The Pioneer. How are you doing? I hope you're healthy and well. As you know, Ukrainian intelligence carried out a very critical operation. An explosion occurred in one of the supply lines of the Russian army between North Korea and China. As we mentioned in our report on this incident, meeting the needs of the Russian army has become very difficult due to the sanctions. For this reason, the needs of the Russian army are being met with the support provided by North Korea and People's Republic of China. However, the extent to which this support works is quite controversial, because according to the recent reports, low-quality artillery and mortar shells caused the Russian army to hit its own positions. Where did these low-quality shells coming from? You guessed it right, North Korea and China. As if all these problems were not enough, there is also the problem of rodent infestations on the front line. So what are the problems that the Russian army is currently facing? Let's take a look at the developments together. As the Pioneer team, we continue to cover the Russia-Ukraine war. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so as not to miss our daily map reports and reports on the agenda. I also read all your comments on our videos. Please continue to express your opinion about our content in the comments. Let's start if you are ready. The Pioneer reports. As we have already mentioned, the Russian armed forces are having problems in terms of reinforcement of the Russian armed forces, both because of those losses on the front line and because of the sanctions. The way to solve this problem is to provide reinforcement from North Korea and China, which are allies of the Russian Federation. However, this is not enough. First of all, these munitions are very weak compared to the Western-made weapons in the lands of the Ukrainian armed forces. They have not been able to prove themselves. Secondly, the munitions in the hands of the Russian armed forces are incompatible with each other. This causes problems for the Russian army. Recently, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine shared a very striking report on this issue with the public. According to these reports, it is seen that the combat effectiveness of the Russian armed forces has decreased due to the dependence on the substandard munitions that directly harms their own troops. In these reports, it is also claimed that the substandard munitions used by the Russian army is North Korean production. The statements of the Ukrainian General Staff also include the following statements. Due to the unsatisfactory conditions of such munitions, rare cases of explosions in barrels of the guns and mortars of the invaders were recorded, which led to the loss of weapons and personnel of the invaders. As you may recall, we have often mentioned in our reports that the Russian armed forces faced heavy losses on the Kherson front line. During this process, there was a situation frequently expressed by the Russian sources. The troops of the Russian army in this region lacked sufficient fire support. The Russian war leadership was constantly criticized on this issue. As you know, Russian General Mikhail Teplinsky is in charge of Dnieper River groups of the Russian armed forces on the Kherson front line. We also conveyed to you the tension between Teplinsky and Vladimir Putin, the president of the Russian Federation. So what does this tension have to do with the North Korean munitions? According to reports of these questions, the North Korean munitions in the hands of the Russian armed forces is allegedly given to use of the Dnieper River Group. So it is possible to make the following inference from here. Russian troops in the region have been disposed of. The Russian war leadership and the Russian administration have provided ammunition support to the region only to silence criticisms. However, this ammunition support is insufficient in terms of the situation in the region and leads to bigger problems. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, more than 1,000 countries of military equipments and ammunitions have been received from North Korea in recent days to reinforce the Russian army. However, as we have already mentioned, most of the ammunition is no use to the Russian armed forces or has malfunctions, causing losses to the Russian army. From this point of view, we can clearly see how effective the sanctions against the Russian Federation are and how important and effective the support to the Ukrainian armed forces is. Therefore, sanctions against the Russian Federation and support for Ukraine must continue. We have already discussed the problems of rodents in the positions of the Russian armed forces. A new report on this issue has been published. As we have already mentioned, the conditions on the front line are also difficult for rodents. Therefore, rodents who want to survive go to the areas where they can find warmth and food. One of these areas is, of course, the Russian positions. There is such a situation. In many areas under the occupation of Russian army, the crops in the cultivated fields could not be harvested. Therefore, this situation enables rodents to find a habitat around the fields. According to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, the rodent population in the region has increased considerably due to the mild attempt. This is normal situation. However, when we examine the damage caused by these rodents to the Russian army, we come across a remarkable information. As we mentioned earlier, rodents are looking for warm areas. In the areas where completely destroyed villages and towns are located, there are usually Russian troops. Of course, the cold winter conditions also affect these Russian soldiers. Therefore, Russian soldiers light fires or take shelter in the village in order to stay warm and survive. Rodents do the same. They also need warmth and survival. Therefore, rodents also take shelter in the same environments as Russian soldiers. The following questions come to the mind here. Are rodents not present in the area where the Ukrainian army is present? Of course, they are existing. However, the Ukrainian army is better prepared for winter conditions thanks to the adequate equipment. These units of the Russian armed forces, on the other hand, due to their inadequate equipment, light fires or develop methods that can radiate heat in order to keep warm in the areas where they are located. Since rodents can detect this heat, they generally prefer their areas where the Russian soldiers are located. Ukrainian main intelligence directorate also has a statement confirming this issue. The statement in question is as follows. We observed that the units of the Russian armed forces in the Kharkiv region are struggling with the outbreak of rodent fever, which is affecting their combat effectiveness. The spread of the disease among enemy troops is due to the insufficient winter clothing and the lack of medical care. The lack of equipment of enemy troops also forced them to contend with the natural environments. There are many fields in the area they occupy. The crops in these fields could not be harvested due to the occupation. Rodents also flock the areas where these crops are concentrated. Unless the enemy ends this occupation, it will have to deal with more problems. So what do you think? Do you think there will be a solution to the problems of ammunition for the Russian army? What do you think about the supply of low-quality North Korean ammunition to Teplensky? What do you think about the rodent problem? Do you think more Russian soldiers will lose their lives due to the epidemic caused by the rodents? Let me know in the comments. I read and care about all your comments.